Yesterday, my husband told me he'd been stuck at the office, but on his wrist was a smear of lipstick that looked like a bite mark. It was a strange, blurred stain the shade of overripe cherry, frozen right over the pulsing vein where the skin is thinnest and most defenseless. Julian stood in the entryway, shaking drops of freezing October rain from his expensive camel coat, and he smelled not of office dust and stale coffee, but of dampness, ozone, and something cloying, like burnt sugar. He was smiling that signature weary smile of his, the one he usually put on for clients in deep trouble, but his eyes darted around, refusing to meet mine. I stared at that spot, and deep inside, somewhere near my solar plexus, a tight, cold knot of anxiety began to uncoil. He noticed my gaze, of course, he noticed everything, and jerked his hand away, adjusting his cuff as if he'd been burned. Traffic, Alice. The city's gone stark raving mad, he threw out, brushing past me into the kitchen, but I heard that false note in his voice, the kind you hear when a violinist misses the string by a millimeter. Why did he hide his hand? Dinner passed in a thick, sticky silence, broken only by the click of silver against porcelain. Julian ate mechanically, slicing his steak into perfectly even squares as if performing surgery, while I sat opposite him, feeling the meat stick in my throat. Our kitchen, a masterpiece of minimalism with its black gloss surfaces and cold lighting, felt like an operating theater tonight, a place where the corpse of our 10-year marriage was being dissected. I watched his hands. The left one, the one with the stain, was now hidden by the long sleeve of his lounge sweater, but I knew it was there, a red brand of betrayal or something worse. He droned on about a new project, a merger between some massive corporations, but the words flew past me, turning into white noise. I found myself analyzing his micro-expressions rather than his meaning, a twitch at the corner of his mouth, a blink delayed too long, fingers gripping the stem of his wine glass until the knuckles turned white. Are you even listening to me? His voice cracked like a whip. I flinched. Of course, darling. I just have a headache. It was our usual game, he lies, and I play sick so I don't have to ask questions. But tonight, the script fell apart because that mark was burned into my retina, uneven, with jagged edges, as if someone had sunk their teeth into him in a fit of desperation or animalistic passion. When he went to shower, leaving his phone on the marble countertop, I froze, my heart battering against my ribs like a bird in a cage. The screen was black and silent, yet it pulled me in like a magnet. I had never checked his phone before, it was beneath my dignity, a violation of the unspoken pact of trust that I thought held our union together. But trust is a fragile vase, and tonight it had cracked. I reached out, my fingers trembling. One touch, and the screen lit up. Passcode. 4 digits. Our wedding year? Incorrect. His birth year? Incorrect. He had changed the code. A cold wave washed over me from head to toe. Julian, who always claimed we had no secrets, had put a new lock on his digital life. At that moment, the phone gave a short vibration, and a notification lit up the locked screen. No name, no number, just the hourglass icon of an app with disappearing messages. The text was hidden, but its very existence at 11 o'clock at night screamed louder than any siren. I yanked my hand back as the water in the bathroom stopped running. I returned to the sink and began furiously scrubbing a clean plate, trying to wash away the feeling of filth, but I knew, this was only the beginning. I lay awake that night, listening to his even, deep breathing, and every breath he took felt like a mockery. Moonlight fell across his face, turning it into a marble mask, beautiful, cold, and utterly alien. I thought about how we ended up here. 10 years ago, he was an ambitious lawyer and I was an art history student who believed love could conquer all. Now he was a partner at a major firm, a fixer for the elite, a man who knew how to bury bodies, and I had become a convenient function, a piece of furniture in his perfect life. I had everything, the black card, the car, the membership at the best gym, but I had no voice. You're too emotional, Alice, he loved to say whenever I tried to talk about my feelings. You overcomplicate things. And I believed him. I took the sedatives he solicitously pushed on me, and I learned to be silent. But tonight, the silence was choking me. I propped myself up on one elbow and looked at his wrist, dangling off the edge of the bed. In the dim light, the stain looked almost black, like a hematoma. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a bite. Someone had wanted to hurt him. Or mark him as property. Morning began with the scent of bleach and lavender. The housekeeper had already started the laundry, but I managed to intercept the hamper with his clothes before it disappeared into the depths of the utility room. I pulled out the shirt he'd worn yesterday. The fabric on the cuff was stiff, as if it had been hand-washed in cold water. I brought the cloth to my face, inhaling expensive cologne, body odor, and something else. A faint but sharp smell of metal and something medicinal. Iodine? Antiseptic? I turned the sleeve inside out. On the inner side of the white fabric was a tiny, barely visible brown speck. Blood. He had tried to scrub the blood out but hadn't finished the job. My brain, usually prone to panic, suddenly began to work with frightening clarity. If it was a lover's bite, why the blood? If it was an accident, why lie? I shoved my hand into his trouser pocket, hoping to find anything, a receipt, a note, a wrapper. Empty. Julian was too smart to leave clues. But in the small watch pocket that no one ever uses, my fingers brushed against something hard and small. It was a SIM card. Old, with worn plastic. Why would a man with 2 iPhones carry a loose SIM in his pocket? At noon, his mother, Eleanor, arrived. She marched into the apartment like a health inspector, immediately criticizing the freshness of the flowers in the vase and my appearance. "You look exhausted, dear," she said, kissing the air an inch from my cheek. "I hope you aren't tormenting Julian with your hysterics. He's going through a difficult time. The Atlas merger is hanging by a thread." I froze with the kettle in my hand. Atlas? Yesterday he said it was a merger of pharmaceutical giants. Isn't it pharma? I asked carefully, pouring the boiling water. My mother-in-law froze, her beady eyes narrowing. "Oh, yes, of course. I must have mixed it up. So much to do, so much to do." She was lying. I saw it in the nervous way she adjusted the string of pearls at her throat. They were both lying to me. It was a conspiracy. I felt like a paranoid patient locked in a hall of mirrors. "By the way," she added, sipping her tea, "Julian asked me to tell you he's going hunting with the partners this weekend. You should stay home and rest." Hunting? Julian hated guns and the woods. He was an urban predator, not a forest one. Once I was alone, I inserted the found SIM card into my old phone, which I kept in a shoebox with winter boots in case of the apocalypse. My hands shook so badly I dropped the back cover 3 times. The phone booted up, the screen flickered, and it loaded the contact list. It was empty. Not a single name. Just incoming and outgoing calls to the same number. Dozens of calls in the last week. And one unread text that had come in this morning while the SIM was off. I opened it, feeling my toes go cold. "She won't shut up. You promised to fix this by Friday. If you don't silence her, I'm going to the police." The message was sent from the same number he had been calling. Who was she? Me? Or the one who left the mark on his hand? The clock was ticking. By Friday, that was tomorrow. I realized the hunting trip Eleanor mentioned wasn't a trip to the woods. It was a cleanup operation. And I might be the mess. I decided to act. I couldn't just sit and wait to be fixed. I copied the number into my phone and ran it through a caller ID app. No names, just strange tags: "Do not answer," "Debts," "The clinic." The clinic? I remembered the smell of antiseptic on his shirt. Julian was a lawyer, but his firm often represented private medical centers, helping to bury malpractice suits. I called a taxi, trying not to think about what I was doing. I wasn't going to a mistress. I was going to someone Julian was afraid of. The address linked to the number in an old database led me to a bleak, gray residential district on the outskirts, a maze of concrete boxes. It smelled of hopelessness and cheap tobacco. I climbed to the 5th floor. The elevator was broken, and every step echoed in the stairwell. The door was metal, battered and peeling. I pressed the buzzer. Silence. Then a rustle. Who is it? The voice was female, hoarse, terrified. I'm Julian's wife, I said, not knowing why I was telling the truth. A heavy pause hung behind the door. Then the lock clicked. A girl opened the door. She couldn't have been more than 25, but she looked as if she had lived 3 lives, all of them miserable. A yellow-purple bruise was blooming under her eye, her lips split. But that wasn't the worst of it. On her wrist, in the exact same spot as Julian's, was a fresh, inflamed scar. A bite mark. Only here, it was deeper, down to the meat. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and hatred. Here to finish me off? She asked, blocking the way. I shook my head, feeling bile rise in my throat. He told me you were the one who bit him, I lied, improvising. The girl laughed bitterly, revealing bloodied teeth. Me? He did this. When I tried to take the documents back. She stepped aside, letting me in. The apartment was empty, as if someone were moving out in a panic. Boxes, papers, and children's toys littered the floor. What documents? I asked, stepping over a teddy bear with a torn paw. Custody papers, she spat, lighting a cigarette right there in the room. The smoke was acrid, cheap. Your husband isn't just a lawyer, honey. He's a vulture. He finds single mothers with real estate or inheritance, gains their trust, helps with debts, and then he files for guardianship of the children and has the mothers declared unfit. I was one of them. He promised to help with a loan. And now he's taking my son. I listened, and the puzzle in my head assembled into a monstrous picture. The Atlas, that wasn't a firm. It was the name of the housing complex where this girl had an apartment. The merger was the consumption of her life. And the bite? I whispered. I was defending myself. Yesterday. He came to take the original birth certificate. I clamped onto his arm. He hit me and left. But he'll be back. Tomorrow is the deadline. I remembered the text, you promised to fix this by Friday. That meant she was this girl, Cassie. And the threat to go to the police came from a third party who knew the truth. Who is helping you? I asked. Cassie looked at me from under her brows. No one. I texted him from my neighbor's phone. He smashed mine. I felt the ground drop out from under me. My husband was a monster. Not just a cheater, but a predator feeding on other people's lives. And I had lived with him for 10 years, spending money stolen from girls like Cassie, wearing clothes bought with children's tears. Guilt crashed over me, so strong I wanted to claw off my own skin. But with the guilt came rage. Cold, calculating rage. I remembered his words, you can't do anything without me. I remembered Eleanor's knowing looks. They all knew. And I was just a screen, a pretty doll creating the illusion of normalcy. Where are the documents now? I asked. Cassie pointed to the ventilation grate near the ceiling. Copies are there. He took the originals. But I have a recording. Voice memo. From yesterday. He admits everything. Threatens to put me in an asylum. I returned home an hour before he arrived. I was calm, smooth as the surface of a dead lake. I made dinner, his favorite mushroom risotto. I put on my best dress, the red one he loved because it made me look like a trophy. When he walked in, I met him with a smile. He looked tense, hiding his hand again. How was your day? He asked, kissing my forehead. His lips were cold. Wonderful, I replied. Your mother stopped by. Mentioned the hunting trip. He tensed, then immediately relaxed. Yes, the men's club. Need to clear my head. We sat at the table. I poured him wine. You know, Julian, I began, toying with the stem of my glass, I was tidying up today and found your old SIM card. The clink of his fork against the plate sounded like a gunshot. He froze. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to mine. The fatigue was gone. In its place was darkness. And what did you do with it, Alice? His voice was soft, insinuating. Nothing, I lied effortlessly. I just threw it away. Why do we need junk? I saw him exhale. He believed me. He thought I was a fool, incapable of playing a complex game. That was my greatest weapon. You're right, darling. We don't need junk. He relaxed, took a sip of wine. I knew that at this very moment, the voice recording Cassie had sent me was already landing in the inboxes of his main competitor, the district attorney he had once humiliated in court, and Child Protective Services, marked urgent. I knew that tomorrow morning, when he went on his hunt, he wouldn't be met by partners with shotguns, but by a SWAT team. But right now, I had to survive the night. A night in the same bed as a monster. Your lipstick is smudged, he said suddenly, reaching toward my face. I didn't flinch. I let his fingers touch my skin. The same fingers that had beaten Cassie. Julian, I asked, looking straight into his pupils, what kind of lipstick was on your hand yesterday? Such a rare shade. Cherry. He pulled his hand back. His face turned to stone. You were imagining things, Alice. It was ink. A red pen leaked. Of course, I nodded. Ink. It's so hard to wash off. I stood up from the table. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I walked to the bedroom, feeling his gaze drilling into my back. He suspected something. But his arrogance was stronger than his fear. He thought he controlled the situation. He didn't know I had already packed a suitcase. Not with clothes. With the deeds to the apartment, which, ironically, he had put in my name to evade taxes. I didn't sleep that night. I lay with my eyes open, listening to the silence. At 3 a.m, his phone vibrated again. He got up carefully, took the call, and went into his study. I slipped out after him, barefoot on the cold parquet. The study door was ajar. Yes, I'll have everything ready, he hissed into the receiver. The girl gets picked up for the ward tomorrow. No, my wife knows nothing. She's a vegetable. Give her a pill and a new dress, and she's happy. I pressed myself against the wall, feeling icy rage boiling inside me. A vegetable. That's who I was to him. A convenient, beautiful vegetable. I slipped back into bed a second before he came out of the study. I closed my eyes and steadied my breathing. Tomorrow. It all ends tomorrow. Friday morning was gray and rainy. Julian dressed with care. He put on his best suit, which was strange for a hunting trip, deeply. Before driving to Cassie, he had a meeting. I'll be back Sunday evening, he said, tying his tie in front of the mirror. Good luck, I said. I hope you catch a big beast. He smirked at his reflection. I always catch what I want. When the door clicked shut behind him, I didn't cry. I walked to the window and watched his black SUV pull out of the parking spot. A minute later, another car pulled up to the gates. A police cruiser. Then another. They blocked the exit. I watched Julian get out of the car, watched him wave his arms, watched his face contort in rage, and then in fear, as the handcuffs clicked onto his wrists, right over the bite mark. I turned away from the window. The apartment was quiet. Perfectly clean, perfectly empty. I walked to the vanity, picked up my lipstick, cherry, the shade I never wore because he said it didn't suit me. I applied it thickly. I walked to the mirror. A stranger looked back at me. Hard, tired, but alive. I took a napkin, pressed it to my lips, leaving a bright, bloody imprint, and placed it on the nightstand next to the watch he'd forgotten in his haste. It was my farewell letter. No words. Just a trace. I left the house with one bag. I took no jewelry, no furs. Just documents and the flash drive with the recordings. A taxi was waiting at the entrance. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Forward," I said. "Just drive." We passed the police cars, past the crowd of neighbors gathering to gawk at the scandal. I saw Eleanor screaming at an officer, swinging her handbag. She spotted me in the taxi window. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, but I had already looked away. 6 months have passed. I live in a small studio on the outskirts, working in a gallery, making pennies compared to what I had, but this money smells of paint and coffee, not lies. Julian is awaiting trial. His empire collapsed like a house of cards, dragging down his career, his reputation, and his freedom. Cassie got her son back. We talk sometimes. She quit smoking and is studying accounting. Yesterday, I received a letter from the detention center. From him. I didn't open it. I simply burned it in the sink, watching the paper curl into black ash. Walking home this evening, it was raining, a cold rain just like that day. I stopped by a shop window and adjusted my scarf. On my wrist, there is now a tattoo, a small bird flying out of a cage. I looked at it and smiled. Scars heal. Even if they look like bites. And as for lipstick, I only wear red now. War paint. The color of victory. The color of the life I finally chose for myself.